Alright, Ricco 4 secret tutorial. This is the second secret tutorial that I've done, because certainly when it comes to learning movement in the game, I think this is a nice natural progression from Bianco 3 secret. So, definitely would recommend having watched my Bianco 3 secret tutorial. The stuff on fundamentals, the theoretical stuff, is useful for understanding what's going on in this level, particularly since in this level you can see the entire stage is breathing and moving. Having a good understanding of fundamentals really helps you understand what you are and aren't doing wrong, so I'm gonna recommend again that everyone watches that tutorial ahead of this one. But yeah, in general, Bianco 3 Secret was quite simple. You could be very exact about it, and this level it has 10 spinning rods, right? Let me actually show off the level using the strat that I'm going to teach. So it has 10 spinning rods. You know, this is the third one, then there's the fourth one here, and then there's the middle section here, right? So here you have 3 cogs, we skip one. This is the 5th rod, the 6th one, 7th one is the 1-up rod, the 8th one we just step on briefly, the 9th one, the big rod, we get a sprint on like this, and then the 10th one is going to be how we finish, and the strat's going to get a 33. So there's a demonstration of the strat there. I'm going to teach a couple of endings for this strat, so they're all going to be yellow cycle strats. People often graduate to blue cycle, and that's on the big rods. Right, so the big rods, the big rod is rod 9. So it says this one, right? So which side do we hit? That's whether it's yellow or blue cycle. So you can see here there's a yellow peg. So that means we're catching yellow cycle. And those strats get a 33 or slower on the in-game timer, or a 35. So the two variants I'm going to teach are going to be 35 and 33. And most players go for blue cycle, they get between 32 and 30. 30 is best possible. And I opted to stick with the 33 yellow cycle for this tutorial and not go further than that, because it is a strat that a beginner can pick up immediately. And you can keep practicing it, and you can basically do exactly the same thing all the way until you get like even a 116, because it barely loses time, you know, a 33 seconds. People who do blue cycle but are bad at it typically get 32s, so they've saved 1 second. The standard RTA strats typically 31s, so you've saved 2 seconds, and then top players will go for 30s, which are 3 seconds faster. But it's still not much in the grand scheme of things, I think, compared to how much time beginners usually lose in different levels, and that's why I thought it would be nice to really just stick to a single strat, which covers basically everyone. And I'm at a sort of 119-ish level, 118 if I could get the run, and for me this strat is perfectly good enough. And also I don't really know blue cycle strats very well, so won't be teaching those. One thing that's important to understand about this level is that, well, the beginning section is fairly straightforward, right? Because all of the rods are kind of in a straight line. You don't even need to turn your camera until you get to the middle section. You get over the cogs, and then once you get over the cogs, right, so these are the cogs, the 3 cogs. Once you get past those, you have like perpendicular rods, and it's all very chaotic and very sensitive. So there's a lot of variation with how the level ends compared to how the level begins, which is important to be mindful of, because it will inform the way we plan strategies, right? The way we strategize about the level. So I'm saying, you know, I have a basically uniform strat that I'm going to teach that's going to kind of try to catch every possible eventuality towards the end. It's going to be very routine in the first half, and then in the second half it's going to try to normalize the level using a few sort of subtle ideas that I will talk about as the level goes on. But it's going to try to basically get it to be as consistent as possible, despite the fact that it's like this. It's very difficult to improvise. So most beginner strats are kind of designed to make secrets very kind of straightforward. You just stop and start, do them at your own pace. But In secrets, it can be difficult to do that because of the cycles, but in this level, the whole level is moving and breathing. So if there is one level where I would recommend everyone to actually learn a strat and to actually learn to be fast, even if you're a beginner, even if you just want to do runs, this is the one level where I would recommend you put in the most effort trying to just get the cycles to be consistent, right? And so that's again plays into why I've picked out this one strat that I think is really good for this. I'm really happy with this strat. It took like years of designing to iron out all of the creases, but I think it's good. So yes, because everything is moving, it is really useful to practice with save states on emulator, right? Obviously don't fix save states and think you're done, like, because you're going to be slower and faster to different sections of the level, and so the save state is going to over normalize the level, and in actual runs you're going to have more variation and you're going to struggle. However, making save states in order to learn bits of movement and just remaking the save states to add in a bit of real world variability, I think is the best way to learn anything really. Any level in the game that's really dynamic like this, cycle based, and it's absolutely indispensable. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to recommend to everyone to try to set up an emulator that you can practice on, even if you run on console. Try to get rid of the input lag difference there sometimes is, so that you can use save states. And obviously I'm going to teach with save states, so it's important to me as well. Yep, so that's the overview, the introduction, I think. Let me just check if I've missed anything. Oh yeah, of course. The other thing I was going to say was part of getting good at this level is obviously as we're going to, you use the same strats and you kind of grow up with the strats. So you're going to get faster and faster as time goes by. And the strat itself requires a bit of deliberately being slow in order to catch cycles cleanly, right? And that's kind of deliberate because that allows you to do the same strat as a beginner. So as a beginner, you can go as fast as possible. You'll still probably be a little bit too slow, but you'll, with a bit of practice, be able to catch these cycles nice and easily, right? But when you get faster and more experienced with the game, you can do the same thing. You just have to be aware of the cycles a bit more and learn to slow down. And that's what we call sandbagging. So sandbagging is stuff like this, like for example, ooh, I'm waiting and then I roll out later, like wait a bit and then this kind of thing, right? So it's important in general for everyone to learn some intuition on reading cycles and learning sort of where you are. And this is something you do naturally as you practice. You're going to pick up cues in your head telling you how fast you're going in the level, basically. So you'll be able to read the positions of these rods. And so I'll give a couple of cues for that as well. That will help for learning to sandbag. Yes, and that is that. So let's get started with the level. Okay. So we start with the start. We start with the start. Very much so. Actually, hang on, sorry. When I smash my keyboard like that, I just have to check again that I've not fucked anything up in OBS. It's all working. Yes, it's fine. Okay, so the save state I made is with a good cutscene mash, so I skipped the introductory cutscene, right? Introductory cutscene, you do the same thing in every level, you just two-thumb mash it, it's always the same, and then you get started with the level. I'm not going to explain that again. Spoke about it at length in the Bianco 3 tutorial. First segment of movement is going to be to deal with the first rod. It's going to be a dive, roll out, dive, roll out, dive, roll out. That's the first section we're going to do in order to get onto rod 2. First tip is that it is possible to dive too fast so that this catches the red block, like the red block like this, if you don't manage to get clear of it. So in order to give yourself enough of a chance to drift left of this red peg, a couple of things to do are, first of all, to dive a little bit later. So a little cue that I use for this is hang on. So, hold up at the beginning of the level, that's fine. Like when Mario's neck crosses over this green line, you see the this picture that you have here. So like the green platform that we're standing on, the front of it, the edge crosses over Mario's neck. Guillotines him. So that's like a little cue you can use to anticipate that, to just dive a little bit more safely. And of course, if you're scared, you can eat a bit of dust as well. If you're scared of this, like this, right? So like I dive and then just slide a little bit, but it's important to like not overdo it, because otherwise you'll be too far back on catching this. But basically, if you can get onto the second rod nicely like that, you should be okay. Tips after that are, what is important is the angle of the stick that you're holding, right? So I said dive, roll out, dive, roll out, dive, roll out. All these rollouts are long rollouts. We hold A for at least 5 frames. During the initial dive and rollout, you hold up left on the stick, right? And then we hold up, and then we hold somewhere between up and upright, and then up. So dive, up, so up, left, up, right, up. That's the pattern. Again, dive, roll out, dive, roll out, dive, roll out. Up, left, up, right, up. Important note, right? So notches, diagonal notches are not consistent from controller to controller, because there is no diagonal dead zone. There's no such thing. You only have dead zones on the cardinal axes. So you might have to, I remember I used to be able to hold upright on the 5th notch, the dive, this dive. I used to be able to hold upright on my old controller, but then suddenly I couldn't on the new one. Like it just kind of does this, right? That's why I say you need to hold somewhere between upright and up, and it's up to you to figure out where, just by practice, but somewhere between upright and up should do it. Fortunately, this is the only part of the level that cannot be done with a notch. The only part. The rest of it is all fine. It's just that. That's a little detail you have to be wary of. There's a little thing that you have to understand here for timing, right? Which is when we hold these notches, we're turning Mario. He's walking, right? That's what we're doing. But we're holding them between jumps and dives. Sorry, dives and rollouts. So you can see here, for example, here, right? I want to turn left and dive. Let me just... Terrible save state, hang on. Okay, so here, right? We want to kind of turn left between the 2 notches, up and upright. But if I hold upright, starting in the save state, right? If I press B, I'm still gonna basically go forwards, depending on what frame I press B. If you do it frame perfectly, you will always just go forwards. Let me show you with a jump dive, right? So I'm holding the notch, but if I press perfectly, I still end up going straight. That's because the frames you spend walking are the frames that you turn in, right? So you need to, whenever you're turning, you need to actually give yourself a couple of frames like this, right? In order to turn, and I'm doing it here as well. So anytime I'm turning, so moving my left stick, like this for example, I'm always turning. I'm always walking a little bit to let Mario hit the notch that I'm holding on the stick. I hold the stick before I land, and then I wait for Mario to start walking in that after I've done my rollouts, and then once he's walking in the right direction, I can do the next dive. That's basically how I would explain that. So yeah, that's that. Because this is a fundamental, like turning in the game efficiently, right? So I'm going to give another example, which is when you're doing late buffered spins, which I spoke about in Bianco 3. We don't need those in either Bianco 3 Secret or Ricco 4 Secret, but it is still an extremely useful fundamental, late buffered spins. If I do the spin late, then the spin will cut into, Mario will wobble a bit, right? And that allows me, to take a few steps before doing the jump. But those steps I can use to turn. So do a spin and then wait a little bit for Mario to turn. Wait for him to start walking in that direction, and so I can go backwards You can even go backwards by doing this, but I wouldn't recommend it because turning all the way around is a little bit sketchy. But like, even for an acute angle, just, you know, time the spin very late and then sometimes you drop it and that's why it's scary. Just time it very late and then hold the direction you want to walk in. But you have to wait. You have to wait for Mario to turn. You can't just, you know, say here I'm holding left. Like say I'm going forward, I'm holding left on the spin. He's still not going to cleanly turn left. If I press A too early, he's going to kind of go like up left, you see? So that's kind of the key. To doing a good late buffered spin is you take enough steps to accelerate. Like if you watch the horizontal speeds, you know, the way that it builds up, it starts from a higher number if you've taken a step. So like here, it's no step, I'm just kind of building up from close to 0, but if I take a step, I'm already walking and I get a lot more speed. So you take the steps both to build up speed and to let yourself turn if you need to. So that's that. Moving on. Where are we now? So, yep, the movement on the second rod is going to look like this. So let me just make a save state. Yeah, okay, so up, left, up. So hold up here. We land somewhere on the second rod, right? And we are pretty much just doing dives and rollouts. We do a jump dive to get on the third rod, and up until about this point, it's just straight dives and rollouts. Jump dive, rollout, all long rollouts, holding A for at least 5 frames. Get a long rollout. Here you have to be aware that where you land on the second rod is a little bit different. It might be more left or more right, depending on how you straighten the stick out. I could be over here. I could be quite close left as well. And so just watch where Mario is and whether it looks like he's gonna do this rollout to get over this seam, right? Because you don't want to be too far left and roll off, like say, if I'm here, it's quite difficult to like, you can butt slide off the edge if you're too far left. So often what you will do is you'll just kind of, you see how I'm nudging the stick right between my dives and rollouts like this. I don't really need to do it here, but just while you're in the air, nudge the stick to the right and you'll have more control there. So that's fine. Everything is pretty straightforward here. Here we're gonna hold up left and then hold up. Again, hold up left and up while you're still in the air and then wait for Mario to take the step to the side and then press dive. Here, dive and then rollouts. And, you know, I roll out while holding A. Because in dive state you don't turn, right? So even though I'm holding up, I'm still not gonna expect to roll out upwards. It's only when you're walking that you can turn fast. So here I'm still rolling out up left despite holding up. But that's not a problem. It's just like having a bit of patience here, so you don't rush the inputs. So you make sure Mario is definitely turned around. Is all that is really important here. So let me save state to just show this off very nicely. So, right, up left, dive up, rollouts. That's the input sequence. Up left, dive up left, dive. Sorry, up left, dive up, rollouts. And when we get to here, we're going to time a jump dive as soon as we're kind of running. So it's a very fluid bit of movement. Just time a jump dive and then redive. Redive means pressing B to dive again after you've landed the first dive. Because Mario is able to just like do this. You know, it's not even that slow. You're basically diving the whole time, moving at 40 plus speed on average. So it's not the worst movement option in the world. Here, just kind of redive. You can slide a little bit here. As a beginner, I think you will not want to slide. Actually, let me see what I said about this. Yes, you kind of have a choice here, right? So on this section, so I'm about to press B. After I press B, I can either roll out immediately. You might be a bit far back, so you might need to slide a little bit forwards. You can either roll out immediately to get onto the next section, or you can wait. You can wait a good long while here, almost a second. Sorry, after the dive. Almost a second you can wait. And the difference is what you think it is. The more you wait, the more you slow down. And so I was saying at the beginning of the level, as you get faster, you will need to learn to sandbag to slow down. This is like a place that you can sandbag in. right? But I won't dwell on that for the time being. I'll explain it a bit more later on. Yes, and depending on how you did this section, in order to go fast, you might find yourself rediving twice. 1, 2, like this. Let me show that off better. I don't have any intermediate save states, and this is the longest part of the level, so I have to like redo it. I don't know why I didn't make another save state. Like here, right? So here I'm about to jump dive. I can actually fit two redives here sometimes. Obviously it's safe to do one always. The second one might not fit. Sometimes I can do 3 redives if my spacing was bad at the beginning. Is something you can do. You can react to your spacing basically to fit in more of these extra dives. But on the whole, I would recommend just sliding. Do 1 redive and then slide. Okay, cool. Next we're on to the middle section. It's in the middle. Middle section, this is my save state. I keep smashing my keyboard. Alright, just check input display is working, yes. Alright. So with the middle section, what we're going to do now, first of all, is triple jump. You roll out here. Obviously, you'll roll out with different spacing, depending on how you did the 4th rod. So the 4th rod is the one we're just coming off, this one. Things will kind of depend. So I could like slide a lot, roll out, land here, or maybe I rolled out here. You know, if I rolled out from further back. We do a triple jump, which is just hold up and press A, and then A, B, because we want a triple jump dive, so we press A and B on the same frame. You can press B later, but there's no need to, I think. But basically, we do that. Important here is to be aligned right. So if you roll out here, just make sure you kind of, during the triple jump, you drift by nudging the stick upright a little bit, just while you're in the air. You see how I'm doing it here, for example. Upright, upright, upright. Sorry. Yeah, upright, upright, nudge, go. You can even hold upright slightly on the triple jump, but I wouldn't hold it too much. Just to sort of get to the, you know, you want to get on the inside of this second cog to the right of this section and land on this bit here. That's all right. So it's really important to think back to the fundamentals, right, that I was explaining in Bianco 3 Secret. What affects this triple jump? The rollout is always consistent spacing. It's we're going to do a long rollout, which is always going to give us the exact same horizontal and vertical speed and the exact same spacing, depending on how far back on this rod we were when we rolled out. So like I can roll out here, I can slide a bit, roll out a bit further forward. So this is back, this is forward. That's a consistent input, right? But then after that, the jumps are affected by, first of all, how much we hold A. So like if I'm doing full A presses, I'm going to go off the top there, off the front. And also if I do first frame A presses, I'm going to get so much more speed than if I do really slow ones like this. I'm trying to do like really shit A presses. Yeah, so like single jump and then the double jump is kind of like this, but like if I hit them first frame, I go forwards more. So basically, yeah, the frame of the landing, the frame of the A press. So, you know, if I hit a press A as soon as I hit the ground, vs if I wait up to 3 frames, there's a 4th frame window to double and triple jump. That's one thing that affects my spacing, and the other thing that affects my spacing is how long I hold A. So like I can do like these really short, sharp jumps, like these really fast jumps like this that just press A very accurately. And I get quite far forwards even though I'm doing absolutely minimal A presses. So my point is, you need to space on this section and do the triple jump from further forward than this line, basically, the line that I'm standing on right now. You need you know, this is kind of on the border of being safe, is Mario standing dead on the center of this line. So like if you land in this region, you will be safe on the triple jump. And so it's up to you to land in this region. So I basically adjust depending on my single jump. I do slightly different button presses on the double jump. You know, it depends how confident I am in hitting early frame A presses on the ground, and also and I adapt around that by basically holding A for different durations of time, right? That is your strategy for handling this section, basically. So it's something to practice, but it's very useful. This is part of the reason we do a triple jump dive at all, is because you have so much flexibility in your spacing. All right, continuing on. We're gonna do a short rollout here, and this is the first part of the level where we're gonna start actually using the camera. So we do short rollouts, and during a rollout is typically when you want to turn. So we just want to turn here to face kind of this direction in the middle of this yellow platform, you know, facing up that way. You'll get a good feel for it as you practice. Turn the camera, spin jump dive, and we'll do another short rollout here. So short rollouts again. And here we're doing a sprint. We're running on the ground quite fast, and I will explain later why we run so fast. But for now, it's important to know, you'll always get this sprint, and during one of these sprints, some of the sprints can be quite long in this level, you have enough time to basically adjust the camera a little bit. So during a rollout is a good time to adjust the camera, during a sprint is a good time to adjust the camera. So like here, I can, you know, adjust the camera before jumping off. And here we basically press AB after we get about halfway through the so this face, we're gonna run up this face. After you get about halfway along that face, like here, you can just press AB to jump dive onto this rod. So I was talking about sandbagging to adjust speed. What a good player will do here, I think, if your movement is good, you will be too fast, and so you'll want to just do a spin jump here instead of a spin jump dive. Slows you down a bit because you dive late. You dive as you're falling, so after the peak of the jump, and then you also slide on the ground a little bit before doing the short rollout. So like this. That way you can basically get on this cycle a bit later if you need to and kill time. But for a beginner, optimally, of course, short rollout, spin jump dive. You should do a short rollout from the end here if you are typically, and like if you're going slowly, you would do that. But if you mess up a bit and you end up quite far back, then a long rollout is good. So the rollout length there will help you to get into a space, right? Good spacing. So you have control with your rollout length of your spacing, forwards and backwards. It's what they're for. Right, so yep, that's the second part of the level where it is good to sandbag after you get faster. Short R press run with the camera, jump dive after halfway, and then we press R to roll out, and then we're going to get another one of these sprints here. So this is the this is another part of the level where it is actually, it doesn't really make sense for me to explain that before I've explained sprinting, so I'll explain sprinting first. Let me just finish off the movement and then I'll talk about sprinting. So here we said jump dive roll out on here with typically you'll do a short A press to roll out there. The reason for the short A press is because you have more running time, or walking time. And walking time gives you more control. It gives you more time to adjust cameras and things, and so typically when you're rolling out on one of these slopes, a shorter A press is good. And the movement after this is you basically run along here or walk along here. It doesn't actually make much of a difference, and then turn and do pretty much the same kind of jump dive as before, right? So let me show you. Roll out here, walk along here, and then you get between the yellow and the red pegs here. You see the yellow and the red pegs. Walk between those and turn to face this rod, and again, after you've walked over half of this face, So the red rod's face, walk over halfway and then jump dive forwards. And then do a long rollout. No, actually a short rollout. Actually, the length of the rollout you do kind of depends on something I will explain in a sec, but essentially do a rollout there. And that's the middle section done. That's how we get on to rod 7, which is this one. Yeah, there are details to explain here, but in order to explain them, I need to cover a couple more fundamentals. So, really important, right, to explain here is this concept of sprinting. What is a sprint and why does it happen? So on this random save state that I made, you'll notice that if I roll out, I land on the face of the yellow of the rod, the yellow peg face, with it fairly flat, right? You see how it's slanted a little bit to the sides. And because the ground is flat, when I land, I start walking. You see how the horizontal speed is about 30. In fact, actually, let me demonstrate this properly for you. Like, I'm standing on a flat space, the flat side of the rod. And when I walk, the walking speed changes, because do you remember when Mario walks, basically his walking speed kind of oscillates between 26 and 32, which you can see in the data display, right? H is the horizontal speed. The horizontal speed basically oscillates between 26 and 32, but it's constantly moving because of his walking animation cycle. So notice what's happening here. It's a bit weird, isn't it? I'm walking down the rod, but when the rod is flat, it works normally, right? So the horizontal speed is wobbling between 26 and 32. But when the rod is slanted, it gets fixed to 32. So what's going on there? Well, the game has a dynamic, and I don't know, it has a mechanic, and I don't know why it has this mechanic, but basically if the rod is slanted, if you're standing on any slanted surface, so this can be like a fixed slanted surface, it doesn't have to be moving like it is at this level, Mario's speed gets preserved. It gets preserved to whatever speed you had when you hit the surface, which in this case is the maximum walking speed of 32. I don't know why it's always 32 and not 26 sometimes. They probably did something there as well. But 32 is the walking speed, and so that gets preserved when Mario's walking along the slope, right? So notice what's happening here. If I hit the slope when it's flat, Mario's speed gets stuck to 32, right? But if I hit the slope later when it is slanted, Mario's speed hits 55 instead, because 55 is the speed of the rollout. So 55, it hits 32 if the slope is flat, but then it accelerates up. It preserves 55 if I hit the slope later. And so this is another one of those things that you can do here, is wait a bit before the rollout. Not that much though, because you will get slowed down by the slope. Wait a bit to try to hit the slope when it is more slopes, more diagonal, and then you will get a sprint, and that's what a sprint is. Like this. Well, actually, let me... Yeah, there we go. This save state is a little bit too fast, which means I'm struggling to get a sprint here. But essentially, it is possible, right? Like this. So this is a sprint. And if you... Obviously, with how speed preservation works, if you do a jump out of a sprint, you go further, so a jump dive out of a sprint will get a lot more height, and so you will actually end up going quite a bit further forwards. Even though the speed is going to be the same, because don't forget, the speed of a dive is always fixed to 48. So this is all things I explained in the Bianco 3 tutorial, the fundamentals part. But yeah, basically that is what a sprint is. And so I showed you the idea of flattening and steepening as well. So this is a bit of a better cycle, this save state. Here, like, see, I get this consistent sprint. If I am sprinting on this surface, right, and this surface is getting more and more vertical, then what happens is I slow down. You see, Mario's speed is always 53, but the more vertical it gets, the more he gets slowed down. You can see he's clearly just like waddling forwards by the end of this. He's getting slower and slower. On the other hand, if I am walking on a surface that is rising, like say the surface on the back here, there's a better example further along the level which I'm going to show you. So like here. So this surface is rising, right? Oh god, the save state didn't come out. Hang on, let me redo this. Oh god. Alright. So this surface is getting more and more flat. That's what I mean by rising. And so you can see that while I am more vertical, Mario's speed is slower. He's running, like he runs more and more quickly, the more the surface flattens out. Even though the horizontal speed says he is consistently at 55, right? And this, he keeps doing this. It doesn't matter what direction you run in. He always runs at the same speed in every direction until the surface flattens out, and then he reverts back to standard walking speed, and that's how you lose the sprint, right? So I hope that loosely made sense. I will do the technical explanation for why this happens, right? You can ignore the next minute if you don't want to learn. This is just kind of for curiosity. But basically, the sprint, right? If I were on, Mario's horizontal speed, if I am on a flat surface, what this means is that the number you see, the 32, right, or whatever, Mario moves that many units in the direction he's facing per frame. When you're on a slope, it works differently, right? When you're on a slope, like when you're getting a sprint like this, Mario is still moving at 55 units. But those 55 units are no longer flat, but rather they are slightly vertical. So like if you imagine the 55 units as an arrow, if we turn that arrow, so this is a vector in maths, a vector of length 55 units. If we turn it more vertically, that's the direction that Mario is moving in. And so the actual horizontal direction that he is moving in is 55, or whatever the speed was, times the cosine of the angle between the horizontal and the slope, right? So the angle of the slope, the cosine of that. So it's kind of like, they made it that way in order to basically make it so that Mario is running more slowly as the surface gets more vertical, right? However, it doesn't matter what direction you run in, the more vertical the surface gets, like say in this example, right? So even if you're running not along the surface, his speed is still determined by the surface of the base of the steepest slope, basically. So not the direction he's running in, but the direction in which the slope is steepest, which in this case is 90 degrees, in the still frame that I've paused on. And so that's the game is basically setting his speed going forwards to that speed, right? The speed that he would be going along on the highest ascent direction. That's a little bit of a tricky explanation. I did my best with it, but it is just for fun. You'll understand what I've said, I think, if you go back over it a few times, and if you have a bit of maths background, it might help. But it's just kind of for interest. So let me summarize this, right? This concept is called de facto speed. But basically the important thing is, if you are on a sufficiently steep slope, so not flat, but steep, then Mario will preserve the speed he lands at, and that's how we get a sprint, by rolling out into a slope, right? Really itchy nose. And the speed that Mario runs at depends on the steepness of the slope. So, his speed gets preserved to the rollout speed, 55, but his actual speed, that's his de facto speed, the actual horizontal speed, distance he's covering per unit time, is less the steeper the slope is, and it gets to literally 0 at the point where the slope becomes vertical and you fall off anyway, right? But of course, if the slope becomes horizontal, he stops running at max speed because he no longer preserves his speed, and so he starts walking at normal speed, and that's how you lose the sprint. So those are the fundamental information that you should remember when trying to figure out why you are going fast and slow in this level, because everything is fucking slopes. So if you want to actually understand you know, how it's going, those are the mechanics to bear in mind. So basically, let me just check I've covered everything: hitting the angled slope, de facto speed, flattening, steepening. It is really interesting with this strat, the yellow cycle that I'm going to be teaching, because we're catching yellow cycle fairly early. Like, you see how steep it is here. This is yellow cycle, the big rod, the 9th rod. Because of how steep it is, when we land, we're going to be running up it fairly slowly, right? And we run faster the more the slope flattens out, but if we stay on it too long, we're just going to end up walking. If we get to this cycle later, then the rod is already flatter. What that means is Mario will run across the rod more quickly. So we save time on the rod if you get to it later. But obviously if you got to it later, you lost more time on the earlier part of the level. What this means is that yellow cycle has a normalizing kind of aspect to it, wherein the speeds that you, like, if you get to the yellow rods, if you get to it earlier, it doesn't really make a difference to how fast you finish this level, because you'll start climbing the slope more slowly. And so you can actually safely get to it later and still finish yellow cycle pretty much optimally. And so when it comes to planning the level out, it doesn't really, there is no reason to want to go faster or slower. You just want to hit yellow cycle. That's kind of the important thing that I wanted to say there. And yeah, sandbagging, right, is something that we need to do in this level, particularly as your skill improves and you become faster. We need to do it in order to be able to hit yellow cycle at all, because otherwise, if we go too fast, this is too steep. And so we're not actually going to be able to hit the surface at all. You know, here, like, you need to press A quite fast as soon as you land. I don't think mashing is going to help, because if you mash, you might do a hop, and when you land from the hop, you're back at walking speed, you lost your sprint. So you just need to time an A press. But if it's too steep and you time an A press, you might have to be frame perfect, or otherwise you just kind of slide off. And so we need to sandbag in order to have this rod not be too steep. And the strats that I am teaching, basically, instead of risking a spin jump dive onto this while it is too steep, so this being the 9th rod, what we instead care about is the 6th rod, which is this one. Because if we can get a sprint on this rod, that means we are going slowly enough to be safe for yellow cycle. So this is a safe state here, which is about 0.8 faster than the other one I will show in a sec. And on this safe state, yellow cycle is quite hard. Because, like, well, yeah, this is too far ahead, and what I meant to say was the reason you know it's too far ahead is because when we roll out here, we don't get a sprint, right? The sprint, if you get a sprint on the 6th rod, that means you are going slowly enough to be safe for yellow cycle. And so we try to do all of our sandbagging before this point on the first part of the level, and that's why I mentioned 3 specific sandbagging windows. Again, if you are a beginner, you probably won't need to sandbag. You should try going as fast as possible and see if you can make the cycle. But if you're making it too fast and you're not getting a sprint, then you need to start introducing sandbagging. That's basically that. So you can see how the strat normalizes differences in skill, differences in speed, everything kind of just gets, you know, everything gets homogenized, or like sort of all the differences get eradicated, and you get what is really a very consistent strat. So yeah, in order to sandbag on this rod, there are 3 different places we sandbag in. So I mentioned them as I went through the level, so I won't show them again. But like here, for example, typically rollouts after the rod has turned and is a bit slanted in this direction, right? So you see this downward slope from left to right. That's about the time that you would know. That's about the time that you would know in order to roll out. That's the visual cue that I use in order to read the cycle here. And I just slide on the ground. You can slide on the ground for like up to 0.8 seconds or so. That's typically how long you can slide after one of these dives. And so, you know, I just wait a little bit, and then that's how I can slow down if I'm going too fast here. But again, if you're a beginner, you'll probably already be slow enough at the beginning in order for this to be slanted, and then you can just go right on ahead, right? So this is the first sandbagging spot. Sorry, I'm just messing up my setup again. The second sandbagging spot is obviously like here, right? So here, instead of doing a spin jump dive, which saves, so, 17.91, we can do like this. And we've managed to cut about, it's not even that much, we've managed to cut about 0.2 by doing this movement. This, instead of this saves about 0.2. So yeah, you can use that to sandbag a little bit. And do that, and then on this cycle, when you come to roll out here, you can basically tell when this slope is steep enough in order for you to be able to roll out on it, right? So like you can wait a bit and then press A in order to get the sprint, but if you do it too early, then you won't get a sprint. You'll just be running along like this, right? So this is just kind of how sandbagging works. Learn to read cues for where you are with the cycles, like how steep this slope is. That's a good cue. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to show here is that well, for starters, if you're going too fast, like I am in this save state, it's actually very hard to make this jump dive because the rod is turning towards you. So you definitely want to try to not go too fast. And even if you do make the jump dive, you're not making the sprint. Like, there's no way. You basically don't have enough time to like wait here before doing the rollouts. So there is that, but also if you're walking, if we do the exact same movement that I showed earlier, it's going to be a little bit different, of course, because if you walk, then you are more inclined to do long rollouts. So like here, right, I'll do a long rollout to try to save a bit of speed. If I do the movement normally, I land on the cycle a bit behind, but it still works completely fine. So it's not actually important if you go slightly too fast so that you can't sandbag. So that you can't get the sprint here, because Mario just walks instead, right? However, the walking is a bit slower and also a bit more sketchy, and if you want to play this level consistently, I think it just feels sketchy. I've never actually failed it, but it just feels like it might be too slow, but it's actually always fine. But nonetheless, for consistency, if you can play the level such that you always get a sprint here, then you're doing well. I think you're doing a bit better. And so that's where the sandbagging comes in. But yeah, this is just a skill that I wanted to get across, because as you get better as a player, it becomes useful to know how to sandbag and how to read cycles. And these are all the intuitions and things that you want to build up. And with all the slopes and things in this level, it's a good way of learning whether you're going fast and slow, how to read things, how to figure out what mistakes you're making if you're not making it to certain cycles on time. And so that's why I just kind of explained everything through like that. All right, that's that. We're going to do the ending now. Oh, actually, one last thing. Here, right? Because the walking is so much slower than sprinting, you get to this cycle later, right? Even though, in order to have been walking in the first place, we had to reach this cycle earlier. So this is another way in which the level balances itself out, basically the strats. And so another reason why the strat is nice, and you always get the same kind of ending cycles on it. So anyway, I'm going to show the endings. So first thing is going to be 35 cycles. So 35 is because it's the in-game timer, right? So let me show off a 35 cycle, starting with, I guess, this save state. I'll make another one, because so this is a save state that has good timing. You can see I don't need to sandbag here. I can do the instant rollout, sprint across here, do a short rollout here. This position here is basically the sort of position we start the ending from. We've kind of done it. We've done a short rollout and we've mounted the 7th rod in this kind of position. You can see like it is just halfway between the green and the red sides. This is how the 35 cycle works, right? So this cycle is really easy, whereas the 33 cycle is a little bit difficult and can be choked under pressure. So if you are under pressure, 35 cycle is nice. Basically, this is how it works. First, we bonk into this in order to slow down. Jump dive, short rollout, jump dive, short rollout, jump dive, redive, long rollout, jump dive, and then the standard ending, which I'm going to show in a bit. So the deliberate bonk is kind of funny, but it is... You're basically just walking here and then you bonk. It is just useful in order to actually land on this. You can obviously do the cycle a little bit faster if you actually wait, and if you find yourself too slow to actually make this jump dive after you bonk, then you might want to actually just stand here and wait for a second, because this is quite a lenient cycle. I'm doing really light rollouts, like very light taps here, in order to maintain maximum control when I'm rolling out on these slopes, right? So both of these rollouts are very light. So like jump dive, tap, jump dive, tap. And the tap is useful here as well because we need to start running in this direction, and if you do a longer rollout you'll get taken to the sides, which is going to slow you down. Yeah, and that's basically that. Yeah. Okay. Running forwards here can be helpful for getting this spacing to come out. So like... Yeah, I don't know. This is a strat, I have to, full disclosure, say I invented it yesterday. So it does need to still be tested a little bit, but nonetheless I think it should be fine. You can see the mistakes that I'm making here as I'm showing it off are I'm just kind of not rolling out, like my direction is a little... It's a little too in this direction. I need to really turn left and have a fairly perpendicular angle onto the big rods in order to be safe on this strat. So basically, by walking, keep walking until you get to the green peg, bonk into it, and then turn fairly perpendicularly. On this cycle, I feel like I'm a little bit too slow to actually catch this. So actually, I might need to not bonk here and just wait. That's actually... I've changed my mind actually, I think waiting is better for a beginner. Just waiting for about a second before doing the jump dive. I think it makes the cycle nicer, now that I think about it. The reason I showed it off with the bonk as well is partly because this is a viable backup if you go for the normal strat and you bonk, right? Then you can actually just do this in order to back it up. Like if you go for a dive past this rod, this peg, and you miss the dive and you just bonk the peg. I think you want to just dive immediately. Actually, yeah, if you're doing this, if you're doing the bonk, you want to actually just jump dive. Oh, that still doesn't work, what the hell? Man, this strat definitely needs more testing. But yeah, okay. That's the final thing I'm going to say about this. If you're deliberately going for this strat, just wait a second here and then jump dive forwards like this. Wait a bit, jump dive, short rollout. Here we do a redive and then a long rollout. On this cycle is actually a bit too far back, because I didn't even have to wait and it still worked. But yeah, it is possible to go too fast, so I would encourage you to wait about a second there. Ugh. Sloppy explanation, but the strat is new, so you will forgive me for that. But yeah, basically, let me show off the ending as well, right? So, like I said, redive, long rollout. We kind of run around here, right? We run around the yellow peg. I really should have made more save states. Yeah, I think my save state, honestly, that save state I improvised was just a little bit too far back, and that's why the bonk was struggling to work. It was just a little bit too slow. I guess it happens. But you're here, right? Jump when you're running along here, jump, dive, re-dive, and roll out. That just takes us around the yellow peg. And during the rollout, like, sorry, jump, dive, re-dive, roll out, and during the rollout we turn the stick to the side. And turn the camera to the side, and then you can keep running, you can keep holding up, and then you can get onto the last rod for the ending movement. And the ending movement is jump, dive onto it, long rollout, and then dive, either dive, roll out, or jump, dive. Jump, like here. Let me actually slow this down so I can explain it better. Right, so here, right, we do a long rollout here. Honestly, actually, I'm not going to say do a long rollout. Do the kind of rollout that you think is appropriate for the spacing. So we land on the blue side, do a rollout, and then we can jump, dive, rollout. That's a good way of spacing if you're further back, but if you are quite forward, as I am here, then just dive rollouts is a better option. So there is a bit of reaction involved in just getting your spacing right here, but jump into delayed dive rollout and just general dive rollout from running dive rollout. Those are the two options that are ideal for spacing. And in this section, I'm not going to tell you how long the rollout should be. Just know you have to get into a position here to grab the shine. And don't forget, if you do a first frame jump dive, you will go higher. So just, it's up to you to figure out how to space the ending. It's a good way to learn a bit of movement details. So that is the 35 cycle, and we're going to do the 33 cycle, and then that's the tutorial. So, oh yeah, the last thing I wanted to say about the 35 cycle is, of course, if you know, the same thing that happened in Bianco 3 Secret, sometimes you just land too far back, jump dive, ground pound, what I just did there, grabs the shine from below. If you are like, it's good to instinctively ground pound if you're going too low under the shine. Yes, so with the 33 cycle then. 33 cycle is the kind of cycle that I used to do, and I guess I will probably still go for it, but it is a little bit risky. So it works the same way here. You know, you do the short rollouts here. This is a better save state. Yeah, like on this save state, if I did the 35 cycle, it would actually work, I think, because it would work better, because probably honestly the reason is just because I got a sprint on this side and I didn't in the other one. This is what I mean, like the slopes and the fact that everything is always turning just can make things difficult sometimes. But I changed my advice. I said just wait a second instead of bonking on the peg. Anyway, digression. Basically here, the 33 cycle is you do the short rollout, you run past this, dive short rollout and spin jump dive straight over it. Run behind the peg and then finish as normal. I had to do a ground pound at the end. This is the 33 cycle. So in order to do this well, the things to think about are, first of all, the cue for diving, you run past the peg. And you see it looks like I'm going to bonk into the peg, but I don't bonk into the peg because the hitbox kind of outruns the peg itself, and the peg is fading away opposite the direction that we're going in. Like, it would be different if the peg were turning towards Mario, but it isn't. And this is also the reason you never want to go on the other side of the peg. You can jump over the peg, but that is risky. The peg's quite tall. It's very affected by the spacing of the timing of the jump dive and these little speed details. So this is why I'm recommending running to the to the left of the peg. As soon as you basically reach the peg, so the front of the peg, press B to dive. And then because the dive is quite small, you need to prepare yourself to roll out immediately and do a short rollout, or a fairly short rollout. Like when I say short rollout, I do mean about a 3-frame rollout, or 2 or 3 frames, because that's kind of what a short rollout would be in RTA. It's not like a perfect single frame rollout. And doing a short rollout here is useful for spacing because, unfortunately, you know, because of the cycle, we're landing on the 8th rod here, as it is kind of fading back. And so depending on the length of the rollout, your spacing, and all sorts of little details, you can land on on different parts of this rod, which heavily affects the timing of the spin put. The spin put being the spin that you do in order to get a spin jump dive. And that's really the reason this is so tricky and easy to choke. But I think from running around this side and just doing a really short rollouts here, you can easily spot the spin jump dive, like the positioning that you're going to do the spin jump in. The other reason you might not want to do this strat and stick to the 35 strat is just because like doing a spin put is, you know, you can easily drop a spin and then you're dead on this level. We try to get rid of spin puts in beginner strats, but unfortunately this one is very difficult to get rid of. Going for the 35 strat works, but like I said, the 33 cycle that I'm teaching now is a cycle that has I have a lot more experience with it. I've been using it for 3 years, and so I know it's reliable, whereas the other one is very much an experimental strat, but there were no other good strats for beginners. So, important again, so I kind of stopped commenting on the camera, but this camera turn can be tricky. Again, because we're sprinting along this surface, right, or walking along it if you're either way. Whenever you're walking or sprinting, you have time to turn the camera. It is good to turn the camera to be more parallel here, but then during this rollout, you want to turn it back in order to make it across here. You can shoot further left or further right. Further right will probably be faster. And it is riskier, because we've slowed down the cycle enough that we're always going to be able to get a sprint here without any jank. Obviously, if you spin jump dive further right, you cross more distance, and so the cycle is even flatter. So it is actually really nice and fast. But it doesn't make a difference, practically speaking, because this spin jump dive is always safe on this cycle. So I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah, so basically that. It is actually extremely safe. You can pretty much just spin jump dive from any part of the back of rod 8 to any part of rod 9. In fact, you can even spin jump dive from like further back on rod 8 if the cycle is different. Like if the cycle's turned, you can spin jump dive from here, as long as it's not turned this much. This is a little too slow. So to demonstrate what I mean by that, I'll show you what happens with this save state, which is, remember, too far ahead, which means I'm not going to get the sprint here. So I have to just walk it. Do a long rollout, but then you can still completely fit this in. It's completely fine, it just works still. And the ending continues to work as well. So that's just a demonstration of why, you know, even if you miss the sprint, it's still pretty good. The strat still works completely fine. However, I still think it's better as a matter of like discipline to try to go for the sprints and know how to slow down in this level. It's just like always been fundamental to how this level has been done, that people know how to slow down if they need to, with yellow cycle particularly. Yep, so that's that. Yeah, and so as for the ending, let me just show the ending. I love this strat because there's just so much running. It's really nice. Oh god, okay. See there, I kind of just phased through the peg. Like that. You will sprint. Again, you can just kind of sprint like this. The way that I used to do this was I would hold forward and then up, right, and then forward again. And the idea is to basically get to this kind of position behind the peg here. Because that's a good position to basically jump dive off of, jump dive from, in order to get onto the ending here, right? So the ending can be a little bit difficult depending on how fast you go. Ideally, you want to aim to get on the green side here, which you definitely can do if you do it fluidly. You see, the way I've been teaching, I've been kind of doing it quite choppily, and so sometimes I don't make it. But if you just do it fluidly, you'll always be able to, I say always, you'll usually be able to make the green side, which is definitely nicer. Because you can jump here. This is why I said jump, delayed dive, and roll out, because particularly if you do the strat this way, you'll land quite far down, like here. I slid off because I failed to pause. But yeah, basically short rollout here. You're going to land on this. You could land anywhere on this green side, and it can be quite far down. And so it's important to do a jump to like clear the edge as it's coming across the top. And then you can delay dive rollouts and just grab the shine like this, right? Jump over the seam. Yeah, so that's basically it. If you mess up and end up over the blue side, again, depends how fast you go. If you're going slowly enough, like it should be fine. It will just work the same way on the blue side and on the green side. But it is important to learn to reaction ground pound. If the blue side is too vertical, like if you're a bit faster on the cycle, you want to do this and then jump dive, roll out, jump dive. So it's just important to do that because this is an easy place to die if you just kind of slide off. And so just be aware that, like that. See, I managed to show it off. So just be aware, if you're over the blue side and you're doing 33 cycle, you've got to, that was meant to be a jump dive. You've got a ground pound on reaction. And you can roll out into the shine if you mess something up, and I don't even know what I've been doing there, but yeah, basically you can roll out into the shine and if you need to. And the cue for rolling out onto the shine is just like, as you slide past the line there, you would do that. That's that. And finally, I've shown everything. The last thing I want to show is that when, well, actually this isn't even me showing anything. It's more just like the thing that I was talking about before. If I'm trying to set this up and I just bonk into this, run forward a couple of steps, jump, short tap, jump dive, short tap, jump. That was supposed to be a dive, I messed up. But basically you do the 35 cycle that I was showing earlier. So it's just important to remember that you can do that. Like, take a couple of steps, I think is better. It's basically just a good backup. That gets you it only loses about 2 seconds, and so it is very useful to have that on hand, just in case you bonk there. Or, you know, in case you get off cycle a bit and just do the thing I was talking about where you just kind of wait. And just, with a bit of experience, you should be able to actually even see when is the right time in order to jump and go for the 35 cycle. Which can get a 34. You saw it here first, if you go a little bit earlier. Yeah, and that's that. That's everything I had to say about this level. And yeah, pretty much. It is just a great opportunity. Why does it say 4 and I should have changed that to a 5, but it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's basically just a great opportunity to learn kind of living, breathing movement, you know, how you deal with slopes, how sprints work, timings of jumps and speed preservation, and dealing with all the different cycles. It's a fun level and a great one to practice, so I would definitely recommend for everyone to just kind of get on this level and mash it out in order to improve your movement as a beginner. Like when you get more advanced, this level is not so good for movement because it's just very cycle-based and scripted. But for a beginner, it's great, I think. And so, yeah, that is Ricco 4. Thanks for watching.